there, Safecrackers. Get your combinations ready because it's time for the Comic Vault, a vault full of comics that includes issues 1 through 5 of Cable, sent to us by one of our wonderful viewers. Thank you, wonderful viewer. We love it when you guys send us stuff. So, issues 1 through 5 of Cable. Now, the thing that really attracted my eye about issues 1 through 5 is that the art is done by Ariel Olivetti, and I love that. I just love this artwork. I think this is fantastic. It's fully painted and just very pretty, and it's one of the things that really attracted me to the Space Ghost comic book that came out a while back, and I just had to jump on that because it was so interesting to me, just this man's style. But of course, you know, it's not just the artwork to look at. The artwork throughout the whole book is pretty. The only complaint I have about the artwork is that, for those of you who have not read it, you're going to say, what? But the baby that Cable is carrying is inconsistently sized. Sometimes the baby seems infinitely small, and then sometimes the baby seems normal sized. So it's kind of weird at times. The ratio of baby to Cable is kind of off. But that's you know, not a big complaint for me. I don't much care. But it is kind of funny when you're reading through the book and you say, wait a second, why is the baby so small? So moving on, let's talk about what actually happens in these 5 comics. There's not a heck of a lot that actually happens within this 5-issue story arc, Cable 1 through 5. I mean, essentially, where the book starts, Cable has according to the book, Cable has escaped into the Cable has escaped into the time stream to protect the firstborn infant after M-Day. For those of you who say, what is M-Day? It's part of Decimation, the spinoff of House of M, where only 1% of the mutant population was left alive. So thereby, Bishop is now hunting down Cable, which we find out at the end of issue 1. And the reason he's doing that is that because Bishop is convinced that this baby that Cable is protecting is the cause of all of this destruction for Decimation. But Cable is convinced that this child will be the savior, thereby these two guys, formerly friends, are fighting against one another for the purposes of either killing or protecting this infant. Now, I find that really interesting. I like that quite a lot. I like it when one person believes something and the other person believes something radically different. And it's kind of this, I'm not sure if this is a word, but prophesarial, you know, this prophecy, this is going to happen, this kid's going to destroy everything, or this kid's going to save everything. And it's interesting to me because it's sympathetic in some way. You can say Bishop's not a straight-up bad guy because Bishop is trying to do what he considers to be the greater good. And Cable's obviously not the bad guy because he's trying to protect a kid. And he's trying to protect this kid not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because he's trying to protect, because this kid's supposed to be the savior, or as Bishop would think, the destroyer. This kid's significant either way. So it depends on how you're looking at it to see who's right or wrong. I don't know. I didn't continue reading this after issue 5, but because that's what I have in my possession is issues 1 through 5. Really? How does that work out? Who knew? So it's really light on plot. Not a lot happens. Basically, Cable jumps into the future. Bishop finds Cable. That's the events of the first issue. He's walking through this little future. He's walking through this little future, and he's finding out that people are kind of violent here. Okay. They mug him and basically say, hey, we want you to pay this bridge toll, but he wasn't crossing the bridge, he's walking near the bridge. And he says, well, I'm not on the bridge. And then there's a fight. And then eventually Bishop finds Cable. The events of issue 2 are Cable fights Bishop. And then a bunch of natives get involved. That's the events of issue 2. Issue 3 is this woman named Sophie saves Cable, picks him up after he pretty much just got his butt handed to him by Bishop. I think I just said these words right. Sophie saves Cable from Bishop's fight. And then the natives that got involved in the fight in issue 2 take Bishop captive with, not a sucker punch, but they hit him in the back of the head. and knocks him out. So, which I kind of question how a guy who absorbs kinetic energy could be knocked out by the butt of a gun, but that's just me. I think that's a little questionable. So, issue 4 is that, well, to end issue 3, Sophie fixes up Cable and basically gives Cable and the baby a place to stay for the evening. Sam Guthrie finds Cable, and then Sam and Bishop fight. Or basically Sam shows Cable that he's still has some stuff left over from the old X-Men days, and Sam and Bishop fight. Bishop kills Sam. Woo! And then issue 5 is Cable and Sophie arm themselves using Sam's arsenal. Why didn't Sam use it to fight Bishop? I have no idea, but I guess Sam thought being Cannonball he would just use his ability to smash into things to defeat the guy that can absorb kinetic energy. Okay. But, so Sam has this entire arsenal at his hands, and then Cable and Sophie arm themselves, and basically Cable escapes into this time stream again, and then Sophie gets some guts and kills a bunch of bigwigs in this reality. Now, Sophie killing a bunch of bigwigs in this reality is somewhat interesting, because they establish here that the people who are in charge is not an ordinary government, it's, I guess, an aristocracy. It's the rich people have officially taken over and no longer care what happened to the poor people. She says that most days people are given food, water, and electricity in exchange for, basically, it's like slave wages, really. But she says most days they give us that. But there's not a lot of build-up toward her character arc. Now, I kind of think that there isn't a big reason to call this a 5-issue story arc. I don't really consider this a story arc. I would consider this the first chapter in something that's actually a story arc. Really, I feel like these 5 issues are milking this concept of Bishop chasing Cable. So, because really what it is a string of fight scenes. And so Sophie is an interesting character who is not given enough to do. She protects Cable, shows that she has some kind of background in military, lineage. A lot of her family were soldiers. So then after she arms herself, she goes and she kills all of these big-wig rich people who are controlling everything. Well, we didn't build up to that. We just stated that she's kind of part of the lower class that's being controlled and, basically crapped upon by the upper class, and then she goes and kills them. So, I'm not saying that it's not a character arc. I'm saying that there's no character development that allows that to be a satisfying character arc. I'm thinking that maybe issues 1 through 4 ought to have been less about fight scenes between Cable and Bishop and more about Cable finding his way through this new reality that he's in, finding his way through this future that may or may not happen, and then determining as to whether or not it's worth helping these people, despite the fact that they may or may not exist in the future. So, because he's doing things that are affecting what we consider the present. So, I do like this idea of, oh yeah, so Bishop loses his arm in a previous issue and finds this giant arm made by Forge that just so happens to be the correct arm. Bishop loses his right arm and he happens to pick up the right arm from Forge. Luckily, Forge made a right arm. Okay. So, I just think that's amusing. So, Bishop has this giant arm, bigger than his other arm, whereas Cable has this this robotic arm that's the same size as his other arm. So it's almost phallic in nature. It's almost like playing a game of who's got the bigger one, and I think that's amusing. And of course, Bishop's arm has a lot more interesting, larger, more deadly features than Cable does, but because he got this giant arm as opposed to a little arm, it has to have more features, right? So it's amusing to me. I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I find it interesting. So something that bothered me quite a lot about this issue, and that bothers me quite a lot about comics in general, is when they use dialect writing. Now, when Sam Guthrie comes on the scene, he's Southern, so he's using AH instead of the word I. So instead of I do this, it says I do this. Well, I understand that he sounds like a Southern man because he's Southern, but I can pretend that he's Southern, and I can have a Southern accent in mind when I read dialogue. I just get annoyed by this. I find it distracting, and I feel that it breaks up. It throws the cadence of speech off because you're trying to read this thing phonetically, which is annoying to me. He's not the only one that's ever done it. Of course, Mark Twain has done it, and he's considered, well, pretty popular. But I get annoyed by it. So, moving on, yeah. I'm not even going to attempt to say this writer's name. I have no idea how to... I can say it, but okay, I'll attempt for your amusement. Swarzynski? Close enough. So, I do think that it's kind of brave to call this a 5-issue story arc. I don't think this is a complete story in and of itself. The only character arc that Cable really gets is that he's supposed to say, I'm trained to be at the end of the 5 issues, he says, I'm trained to be a soldier. Maybe I'm trained for taking care of this kid, too. I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's a worthwhile story arc, but not one that's built towards. Because it just kind of comes up at the end. I find it weird that this kid almost never cries. She cries a few times throughout the 5 issues, even though these giant battle scenes are going on. It seems like the kid only cries when something truly, truly terrible happens near her. But things that are just definitely terrible as opposed to 100% ground-shaking terrible, those are okay. I think that's weird. So anyway, this kid rarely ever cries, which might be indicative of a kind of a hostile environment from the get-go. But you know what? This kid is an infant. It's not like it's a toddler. So she hasn't really had a lot of time to get situated. I think it's questionable. But I do love this little contraption that's on the cover of issue 5 that Cable puts this kid in. It looks kind of like a boiler system to protect this kid, and it's hilarious to me. It's this metal cage for this little girl, and it's so funny to me, and it fits her perfectly, and it's kind of adorable, even if it's steampunkish. I liked that a lot. I don't know where or how he could have found things that fit so perfectly. But I didn't care because I thought it was so amusing. So essentially, I'm going to come down on these 5 issues as there are some good ideas in them, but ultimately they're not particularly worthwhile. So it's just 5 issues. If you're interested in Cable and you like Olivetti's work, you might as well. I mean, it's very pretty. It's very nice to look at. But ultimately, the 5 issues, I think you have to read the rest of the Cable series for any of this stuff to really have a solid story arc. I haven't read it. I don't know where it's going, but within these 5 issues, it doesn't go anywhere. So, thanks for watching the Comic Vault, and we'll catch you next time when we do some other Comic Vaulty type things.